Oh, that's kind of a nice gift. To his successor.
All right, welcome everyone. This is Kristen Vincent, Chair of the Westborough School Committee. Today is Wednesday, February 16th, 2022. This meeting of the Westborough School Committee is called to order. Please stand if you are able for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you for joining us this evening. I'd like to notify everyone in the room with us tonight that this meeting is being recorded by Westborough TV. School committee meetings are available for remote viewing or listening on Westborough TV's government channels, Verizon 28 and Charter 192, and online on the Westborough TV YouTube channel. And thank you so much to Westborough TV for covering our broadcast tonight. We have with us for this meeting Superintendent Amber Bach, Assistant Superintendent Dr. Daniel Mayer, Director of Finance and Administration David Gordon, Vice Chair of the Westborough School Committee Steve Jarrett, School Committee members Sarah Dulay and Lisa Edinburgh. Raghu Nandan is unable to attend the meeting tonight. We have Student Representative Andrew Chen, welcome. And our recording secretary Jen Benton is taking the minutes remotely. And we have staff from Westborough TV. So I'll quickly run through our agenda for this meeting. We'll have an approval of minutes from February 2nd, 2022 regular session. We'll have the superintendent's report, assistant superintendent's report, and the director of finance and administration's report. Then we'll have school committee member reports, building project updates, citizens requests, a COVID update. We'll have a vote to rescind a policy, EBCFA face coverings. We'll have a request for approval of a field trip to the Massachusetts DECA State Career Development Conference, which is taking place March 10th through the 12th. We'll have an annual report from the Borough and Sugar Shack. We'll have an update on the Fales School gymnasium floor. We will hear about the superintendent's mid-year goals. We have a grant announcement for lighting at Mill Pond, and we'll have a brief budget discussion, and then we will adjourn. There's no need for an executive session tonight. So we'll begin with an approval of minutes from February 2nd, 2022 regular session.
I approve the amended February 2nd meeting minutes.
Okay, so you make a motion to,
Sorry,
oh, that's okay.
I make,
She just approved them single-handedly.
Second.
I make a motion to approve.
Okay, thank
amended
you.
February 2nd minutes.
And Steve seconded that. I also have an amendment, so why don't you go ahead and share your amendment?
Under citizens' request, the speaker's name is Boyd Conklin, and this correction is for all the Lloyd Complins from prior meetings that had been posted. Under COVID updates, the superintendent was directed to begin collecting vaccination data for the K through 6 schools in order to submit a waiver application from DESE. The school committee concluded that flexible masking would resume soon thereafter when the Westborough Board of Health lifts the mask mandate, or February 28th, whichever is sooner.
Thank you. And on the minutes under vote school year calendar, there was a motion. Mr. Jarrett made a motion to approve the 2022-2023 school year calendar with the amendment of December 23rd being a half day. Ms. Dulay seconded the motion. It says that the committee voted 5-0 in favor, and I'd like to change that to say that the committee voted 4-1 in favor of the motion, that Vincent was a no. Any other amendments to the minutes? All right, all in favor? Okay, so that's 4-0, one member being absent, so those minutes are approved. Thank you very much. I'll turn it over to our superintendent.
Thank you very much. Good to see you all. We started the week with surprise snow. I call it surprise snow because I did not know when I went to bed that it was going to snow that much. And I hadn't seen anything from any of the other superintendents that there was going to be that much snow. And then did a quick assessment at 5:30, which is late. You know, usually those start around 4. So anyway, that was the start to the week. I think it was a good strategic call for a delay so that we would have an opportunity to get things cleaned up. It was pretty sloppy out. and was pleased to be able to get that out in time to let people know. But I'm always cognizant of the fact that when it's late, on the later side, we have people that are already on the roads. So I'm sorry for anyone who felt that my call was late. I was glad that we had school because it was Valentine's Day, and you don't cancel school on Valentine's Day. There are a lot of really fun events associated with school days, especially for our younger students, and the positive and enjoyable feel of the day was able to be held, which was nice. We had sporting events that went on and a variety of other things. This past weekend, the high school did have their winter play, which I was able to attend. It was excellent. And they are now beginning to prepare for Les Mis and starting with, I believe, tryouts this week or next week. Andrew will probably have more accurate data. And we're, of course, steaming towards vacation week. And for people that are traveling, we wish you well. And I'm hoping that everybody gets to step away and enjoy some downtime. And when we return, we move to flex masking when we return. And I'll talk more about that when we do the COVID update.
Thank you. Daniel?
I don't have any updates tonight.
Okay, thanks. Dave?
No updates from me. I'll join Superintendent Bach at the end for the budget discussion.
Oh, sure. Okay, thank you. So we'll turn to our school committee member reports. So Andrew, what do you have for us tonight?
Thank you. So we had our monthly open meeting today at the high school. A lot of things were discussed, specifically focused on the history department and how specific topics such as the Holocaust and things should be addressed in the curriculum from freshman year, because I know a lot of the times there's a set curriculum for the year and sometimes they don't get through everything. And that means, especially like COVID and everything, that left some things to be just like not addressed at all. And yeah, so there were some students who brought that up. Also with the reintroduction of flexible masking, I had some students approach me who mentioned that they felt uncomfortable with unmasking because of there was some peer pressure, like in the hallways or stuff from other students about masking, because the majority of students at the high school remain masked. So some students don't feel as comfortable with unmasking, things like that. There's another thing about like the mental health resources at the high school. Talking with like a lot of my fellow students, a lot of students don't realize like the resources, like the psychologists and counselors available at the resources available to address mental health. And so I'm proposing that like during like social emotional learning days, when like counselors come in and talk about these things, to emphasize like the resources that are available to the students. Yeah. Also on Monday, Mrs. Hvac, you mentioned how it was strategically for the delay. So as a class officer, we had like cookie grams where we had to deliver them in the morning. So the delay actually turned out in favor for us because we had some extra time to deliver some cookie grams, which is nice. Yeah, spring sports meeting, there's one, the first spring sports meeting is an informational meeting tomorrow for the high school. And yeah, that's all I have to report.
Yeah, busy time of year. Yeah, thank you. Sarah?
I don't have much. Winter sports are wrapping up, but a lot of our teams are having states and playoffs, stuff like that. Even tonight, I think everyone's playing almost everyone. I know both basketball and the hockey team are starting their playoff rounds, so good luck to all of them. And I know Hastings is having a spirit week this week with lots of dressing up. I think your favorite character one day, and Hawaiian and tropical themes and things like that. So they're having fun over there. And there was a nice article in the Community Advocate about Fails putting on the Olympics in the gym over there. So that was a cute article if you haven't seen it. And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Lisa?
I was only going to mention the election on March 8th at the high school. The local election will be in progress. I also wanted to mention, in case you missed the superintendent email, and in case you filled out your calendar back last summer, there is school on March 1st, and there is no school on March 8th. I'm just going to repeat that because I think people will look at their calendar and say, is there no school then? So if you missed it, it was updated a little while ago, and just letting people know.
Thank you. That's an important reminder. Steve, anything for your report?
No, I'll deal with the construction projects when that comes up.
Okay, thank you. No, but you can. Go
Oh,
ahead.
I'm sorry. One more thing. There is a program called Let's Talk About It, Your Youth Mental Health. It's being brought to you by Westborough Connects, and I believe, is it also Westborough Youth and Family Services? But it is virtual, and it is Thursday, March 3rd from 7 to 8:30. It should be an interesting conversation circle for parents and caregivers, specifically Westborough middle and high school youth. So that should be interesting.
Thanks. And I also want to remind everyone about town meeting, which is March 19th at the high school. It's a Saturday, and it starts at 9 a.m. and it goes until everything's voted on. So it's hard to say when the day ends, but we hope to see a lot of people come and participate in our form of town government here in Westborough. So Steve, I'm going to turn it over to you for some building project updates.
Okay, we have an agenda item later, about 5 items later, that will discuss the gym floor in Fales.
Okay.
But update in regards to the sprinkler system at Hastings. As I mentioned in a past meeting, that the work is done and that punch list items continue, and there has been a walkthrough with the fire department in regards to the project with some minor changes that are necessary there. Otherwise, the project is done, and it is slightly below budget, which is a good thing, and continues the history of school projects being such. Sometimes they're closer than we like, but so far, so good. As far as the general work at Fales, the building's done, punch lists continue. As I mentioned in the last meeting, there's approximately 20 punch list items to finish, of which the majority of those are waiting for equipment that's been tied up associated with issues with supply chain availability of parts, including doors and other things that are out there. We continue to fix minor problems within the building, and although we've had a couple issues that we have to deal with, and that's the subject for the gym floor discussion a little later. We still do have contingency money left. The way the contract was written for the overall project, it's construction manager is on a guaranteed maximum price. So to the extent that we run into problems that absorb the remaining part of our contingency, we will not have to pay more for the scope of work that was originally bought. However, if there are other things that occurred, such as out-of-scope items that we discovered after the fact, then those items would still be on the table to deal with in whatever way they come up. The remaining work is the ball field preparation and the backfill of where the old school building was, as well as the final paving and planting and the like in the spring. We're very hopeful that we'll be done with the project sometime in June with all things done, except for any glitches that I guess we find at that time that we have to continue to work on. So that's it for this particular section on Fales.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Steve? All right, great. Thank you, Steve. We'll move on to citizens' request. Is there anyone here that wishes to make a statement to the school committee tonight? Sure, come on up. Yeah, you can sit at the table there. You don't have to do that. It's from another meeting.
So Boyd Conklin, and that is BOYDCONKLIN,
You, Boyd.
8 Water Street. And another plug for Nomizo Learning Labs at 25 West Main Street here in Westborough. Game-based education, critical thinking, grades 1 through 12, just opened up this week. Wanted to say some Darwinian survival strategies, cooperation and competition, more cooperative organisms. The idea is they'll outcompete individualistic. For the Klaus Schwab Party of Davos guys, this is the Great Reset guy. His new book is The Narrative. He talks about cooperation and empathy. His cooperation is pathological altruism, and his empathy is capitulation. Recent Pfizer data that's still suppressed, 1,200 people died 90 days after this COVID vaccine trial. The information's not out everybody yet. HIV, human immunodeficiency virus. Well, I think this vaccine is the human immunodeficiency vaccine. It's suppressing and ruining people's immune systems, the vaccine gene therapy. So you could also call it AIDS, acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, because from the vaccine people have acquired immunodeficiency. And I will state that one side is going to win and one side is going to lose. Righteous indignation. The populist, nationalist, reformed Republican Party, the Democratic Party will join with the establishment Republican Party. The big steal has providential aspects to it in every aspect of your life. Geopolitics, national security, high finance, border, schools, which we are right now, mandates, which we're going through here, medicine, unbridgeable gap from what we believe to what is believed by apparently the school committee. One side will win and one side will lose once again. This is driven by the craven stealing of the election. The Soros-backed Democratic Party can be shattered. Early voting started on Monday in Texas. We will see. Woke shock troops have convinced millions of intellectually stunted people, Western white society, classical literature, classical music, mathematics, and Dr. Seuss are part and parcel of a white hatescape responsible for oppressing minorities. No shortage of enterprising entrepreneurs charging top dollar for white people to sit through a full-course meal of lectures on the inherent evils of their race.
Thank you, Boyd. That's 3 minutes.
3 minutes?
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else for citizens' requests? Great, thank you. We're going to move on to our next agenda item, that is our COVID update.
Thank you. So I want to make sure, just let me pull up my notes here. Good to see you all. I'm looking forward to giving you kind of some key updates tonight, and then I'll probably push out another reminder, probably Friday, just kind of, following up on the types of communications that we've already provided. I think people get a little saturated, and at a certain point, they just need their individual questions answered, and I think it tends to fall to building-based principals and, secretaries and people that start to answer individual questions. I'm kind of looking forward to that shift, because I think it gives people that more personalized type of question that they can get answered. So tonight I'll provide an update. I will push one more overall update, but I think as people have generalized questions, they should email their principal. They certainly can email me, but I'm going to revert it, typically to the principal. Maybe email the principal and CC me, like we can work it out that way. Either way, but I'm always going to make sure that I try to direct you to the building level and let them answer kind of any specific questions. But I too will continue to welcome email and answer any individual questions have as we kind of go through the next phase. So overall, I think people's questions have been right on point and actually relatively quiet. I think people feel like the next transition, the phase feels logical in that it implements what was already implemented. So it feels like there have been less questions, so that feels good to me. So a couple of things, which is we moved back at Gibbons in the high school to flex masking on Monday. Last week, and now we're in week 2. So I think to Andrew's points, I want to make a couple specific follow-ups. I agree with him. I believe that in the return to flex masking, there's work to do in the relationship work with faculty and students, making sure that we're being clear. And I want to be clear that I am on record of being clear that the only places where masking should be required are in the medically exempt classes that we have marked. And both principals are, working with me to have thoughtful conversations with people, but it is important and necessary for all faculty to move forward and to accept the flexibility that students have for their rights to not mask, and for us to create a culture of comfort for both of those to live together. I think the time has come for that. I think the evolution of that across the span of the week at Gibbons and High School shows progress. I think there have been a lot of individual conversations this week, if needed, kind of on the ground with kids or faculty. If somebody has a question about that, they can email me, they can email their principal, and that is the right kind of chain of command to get a question answered about why is this class masking, or what's the status of this. We're very, very comfortable answering those questions. I think that we all know that across the span of the trajectory of the pandemic, that we've managed a full bell curve of emotions and needs for everyone, and that this transitional change, whenever we make a policy shift in terms of implementation, it causes stresses for people. Each time we've moved through those really successfully, and I just want to acknowledge, each time we've moved through all of those changes very successfully. We will move through this transition and come to a place where I think comfortable, flexible masking is accepted by everybody and people can make their choices. The support from the admin team and from all of us is there for that discussion. So people shouldn't be concerned about asking, it's fine. And I think, to Andrew's points, I think that, students need to feel comfortable that they can indeed make choices that they're comfortable with. And I want to acknowledge that our faculty will support that. So that work will continue, and I just want to make sure that people know they can reach out to me if they have questions. As we turn towards, so the procedures at Gibbons and the high school are in place and moving forward, and none of that has changed. It's just the emotional shifts each time we kind of mask and unmask. So I feel like, to your thoughts that we've made this transition, it moves forward from here. I think it should continue to smooth out. Now we move to elementary. So I want to give you an update tonight on the transition for our other 4 schools. So, currently, I think there's just really good news about where we are, and I want to kind of walk you through those updates. I feel really good as we've got 3 days heading into vacation that we're very well staged to come back with flex masking in place at all four schools with any kind of guidelines in place. So I'm feeling really good tonight. I'm going to enjoy the moment. I feel very good. So as you look at between now and Friday, things that we'll go ahead and put in place, and one is that we're currently holding HR meetings. Human Resources is meeting with teachers who have health concerns. I want to be clear that all of the mask accommodations that were given centered around doctor validated and clear medical reasons where somebody needs a supportive amount of masking in their classroom to be safe. And those are limited and very clearly defined. And I think that when we look across district, I think we have 12 faculty at Gibbons and high school across those 2 large faculties. It looks like at the elementary level, for the remaining 4 schools, we have between 3 to 5. So a very small number of classrooms where there are any faculty with medical concerns where we might need to be asking for some additional masking in those classrooms. So that means across all 4 schools, about 3 to 5 staff. So HR is having really thoughtful and, respectful conversations with people. Staff have been great about reaching out and asking questions. I feel very good about where that is. And, I think the faculty that are having conversations are really justified and need to be completed. One of the good things about that I think is interesting as well is that when I look at those 3 to 5 faculty where conversations are happening, it looks like none of those require a classroom to mask all day. It might be a special or somebody who's coming in and out of a classroom or who's doing pull-out work or small group work. So it leaves us in a place where those classrooms aren't required. There's not, those 3 to 5 teachers don't set up a situation where a class is masking all day. So that feels very, I was kind of, concerned about that piece being the next implementation phase, whereas like at Gibbons in the high school, you're moving all day, your schedule changes, you might mask in a class and then move to the hallway or not be masked in your next class, but there was that flexibility that it was going to be a part of your day, not your whole day. When you're in a self-contained setting, the parameters that become more complicated, and we're working through a couple of cases. These 3 to 5 staff don't create those cases, so that's kind of advantageous for us and for them, because they want to make sure that they feel like these are places where they might be seeing many, many kids all day, so it does change some of those parameters for them health-wise. So those conversations are happening. I feel good about where they are. Those will be resolved and kind of managed at a building level and ready to go. Principals are also working carefully to answer questions and sending follow-up communications so parents and students and faculty feel ready to go. One of the things that we're doing is also then looking at very specified limited student cases. We have across this district of 4,000 students, some very, very medically fragile kids who come to public schools for their education and who require our special care, not just academically, but medically. And so I believe that as a values-based district that cares about people and relationships, we want to acknowledge that not all people's circumstances are the same and that there are medically fragile cases where we want to be really thoughtful. I think we've worked that through carefully at Gibbons and the high school again, and those cases have been handled individually with families and students. So we're now replicating that, working with families. It looks like across district now we have like 2 to 3 students that we're working with. So I think that, some of those initial communications caused anxiety for other families concerned that their students are going to have to continue to mask excessively. I just want to be reassuring to people that we're going to work it through and that we'll create as much flexibility as we can, and that it's a process. It's a process that if you look at how we've worked through all of this, it just takes time to stage really personal and thoughtful conversations and to have follow-up meetings with people and to get things in place. I have confidence that as we return on the 28th, that we will have the right classes with the right accommodations in place, and I'm comfortable with those and believe they represent the care and safety that we want to provide both faculty and students in Westborough. And I'm confident that the personal conversations that need to happen, the emails or different questions will all get answered. I know there were some follow-up calls going out today, and principals have been able to have some thoughtful conversations. So I feel really good about where those things are. I just want to be reassuring to all of you, because I know you receive email, that's just, and calls, and I'm glad that we're available to everybody. I think we're in a good place. And to people listening and to the communications that come out, we'll just continue working through the details. To be at a place where we now have 4,000 students moving to flex masking and to have 2 to 3 cases where we're looking at, needing some exceptions, I think we've been really, really limited and worked really hard. And I want to commend families that have worked with us, recognizing that they've come at it with a lot of flexibility as well. So I just want to give a shout out of thanks to our families and to faculty as we all move forward. So by Friday, I think the majority of all of that will be ironed out. I think there's a couple follow-ups that will happen in the next 2 days. Like I said, some happen tonight and more will happen tomorrow. And I think that by the time we have vacation week, people have that settled opportunity to go away and relax. When we come back, we should shift into flex masking. I think for our young learners, what that looks like is you're going to wear your mask on the bus. You're going to come off the bus. You can take your mask off as you hop off the bus. You go inside and into your classroom. As you move throughout your day, you might go to a class where you have to mask or do a small group session or, a meeting where that might happen. But our schools across the board looking at this data should be in a place where things should be flexible. So again, I have 2 cases I'm working through. I think that those will evolve and get a little bit more flexible. So I guess I would open it up to questions. The other benchmark I would note is that when we've been interacting with faculty and families around those health accommodations, we were clear that we would maintain those up to April vacation. Felt like the final transition towards warmer weather, more outdoor opportunity, more data, hopefully moving us forward and sustaining the good direction that the state is heading in, and that we would be in a place where we would then shed any other specialized accommodations, and things would then shift to very, very personal choice. If you have a personal choice, you can N95 your protections for yourself, and we need to come to a place where we remove kind of that last layer of any type of transitional support. I think it would be based upon having watched the trajectory between now to then. And I would think that I'll keep you updated, and I'll keep sharing as we go. And we certainly can change direction if information gives us, an opportunity to move more quickly. I think typically what happens, and we've seen this at Gibbons in the high school, is people come in with a plan in place and then they get more comfortable, and it tends to, they self-move away from certain things. So I think we'll be able to come into the spring in a very good place. Again, we had a jump start. We were one originally of 5 districts that moved forward early out of 350 across the state. And we turn around and we're one of 40 that was ahead of the curve in terms of being able to flex mask, and are already back into flex masking now and have a plan already in place for the 28th. So there are districts that are planning on moving forward. They have a lot of ironing out of details to do. I mean, I'm sitting in meetings right now with other superintendents who are asking a lot of questions about how we got where we are and what we can do to support each other. There's a very good network of that update, but they're trying to do some of those pieces now. So I actually just sent off our data to like 5 superintendents, this week, who are trying to navigate bringing their faculty and families forward with the same sense of support that we've been able to provide. So that's my update for tonight. I guess I would open it up to any conversation.
Questions? Steve? And then Lisa?
Yeah, I have a scenario that came up in some discussions that I had recently, and the scenario is something like this. Prior to the pandemic, if we had a student in elementary school who was immunocompromised, but the rest of the people, faculty, otherwise, how did we treat that person versus how we will treat the person in the same circumstance after February 28th? Would that person after the 28th be the immunocompromised person to protect themselves, wear a mask? And what about the rest of the students in the same class? Versus before, I don't think anybody really thought about it.
Right. I mean, I think, so 2 pieces, which is, I think there were a lot of things that we handled differently in our world before all this happened to us, and that many people who had compromising medical issues had a variety of things that they did more invisibly. Some of our students have masked, but in a very, very limited basis. I think you would see more that they would have a kind of invisible extended absences, or, different accommodations that they requested personally in classrooms. When I look at the trajectory of kind of the things I know about some of our medically fragile students, certainly we have a lot of precautions in place for our most medically fragile, but they've had their own nurses, and we have students with feeding tubes, we have students with a variety of complex medical issues. So in cases like that, with those individual classes, sometimes people are masking when they're up close with those students. Then you have a whole tier of people who have autoimmune issues that can be vastly invisible. They tend to fluctuate with seasons and other illnesses, or they might be compounded by multiple things. I mean, these are all things people have lived with. And I think prior to the pandemic, handled kind of very individually. Our target goal is to get back to that. That's exactly where I see us going. I think that we will begin that move as of the 28th, and then close out the last staged support that we put in place by April break is kind of my anticipated sense of where we'll be. Our trajectory of numbers might merit an earlier conversation, but I think one of the things you guys have done is try to keep the place feeling stable in terms of decisions. So typically, we would like to get back to that phase where it might be somewhat invisible, although I think you'll see in our world more masking than we did before, I think. I don't know. We'll see where we end up. I think there might be families that would be more comfortable sending their kids to school masked if they felt like they require it than they did 2 years ago, where they would be concerned that that would somehow be an ostracizing or separating experience for their child. I think you'll see some of those students more flexible with that maybe in our future. I'm not quite sure. We'll see.
Yeah, it's interesting that the scenario now shifts the opposite way as a result of the state's mandate and DESI's changes as well.
Sure, we built an infrastructure of responsiveness that set all these limitations, and now we're dismantling it. And I think, it's kind of one of those things, like when you build something, it creates a sense of comfort and continuity that some people feel like is a positive change and they would keep in place. And other people are like, it's time to dismantle that. So, I think we're living right now in the dismantling phase, and we've staged it, we're stepping it down, I think, appropriately. We're also making a variety, you can read the paper, you can look at what's going on. There's a variety of opinions about whether or not the time is now or not. And I think we've tried to stage each transition with some protections built in to move forward with people feeling listened to. I think the vast sense of people feeling we're trying to make the right moves for everybody moving forward has built a sense of confidence that we'll get through this next phase too. You still have students unvaccinated at the age level. You're down to preschool now where you're moving to flex masking, and there's certainly feelings about that. So it's still kind of a stressful time for a wide array of people, which is why I think that you're hearing still that contradictory piece.
Yeah, it's nice that we're moving into the zone of common sense
Yeah.
instead of big brother mandates.
Yeah, I think, and I'm hoping that the trajectory of the medical data will continue to give us good news that, students are remaining healthy, that school-based settings remain really, really good, all those things that we've been able to benchmark along the way as we've made each change. And again, I think I feel good about where we are. I feel good about the decisions. We have a very, very tight, limited parameter of accommodations, and I think that they're merited and we can move forward. I think, I'm most concerned about dealing with the invisible culture of power struggles around masking versus not masking. I think, I'm disappointed that we would be at a place where students or faculty would be pressuring each other either way, and I think there's both adults and kids at play in that, and I think it's important for all of us to, I've faced that discomfort myself going into a building, okay, I would like to take my mask off. How is the faculty going to feel about that if you walk into a room and they're all masking? You're like, so it's a weird and awkward transition for all of us, not just for kids, but for adults. And I think we just need to help each other through it. I don't see it as ill-intentioned or coming from negative emotions or a desire to make a student or a faculty member feel terrible. That's not the kind of faculty or kids we have, but it's an outcome of the interaction. And that's a truth, which is recognizing that feeling awkward or not comfortable are not feelings that we want associated for faculty or students as we kind of move through this next phase. I have confidence that typically we've moved through each of these very, very quickly and worked collaboratively together on, talking it through. It's going to be very interesting.
Do you mind if I do? Yeah. I know there's a difference between when each of us walks into a building versus a student who walks into a classroom and the teacher has a different power structure in place. So it's a little
Oh, yeah, I'm not
So,
equating them
that.
together. I don't want to be
Right.
misunderstood. I'm just,
Okay.
I'm offering sympathy to the fact that I recognize that it's an awkward phase. And I was clear in my opening statement that we have limited structured medical interventions. Those classes are masked and the others will not. And that's our responsibility to put in place. And if somebody has, an issue where they think there's confusion about that, I remain very comfortable clarifying.
Okay, so I just had a couple of questions. So in the communication to parents where their situation where their child is in a mass classroom, or even just the general makeup, and you're going to be sending out a communication tonight, it sounded
Probably
as if-
tomorrow.
Probably tomorrow. I think there's always that question of, if you're reassessing at the April break, I think people want to know, when is it going to end? What, is there an ending? Reassess means it could continue. And so I think there is that concern for a lot of people.
Yeah, no, that's good feedback.
The other question is emails that went to communicate that your child's in a masked classroom for much of the day. Does it say that there's flexibility in that classroom so that they recognize that it's not an all-day masking situation? Because I think if they understood that flexible masking actually gives us flexibility and a range in order to make it more possible to be comfortable in a classroom, then that's what it is. And I think people miss that. It sounds like you've shared it with other superintendents, because other districts are looking for ways to do this with care, where you value your personnel and you value your students. And I think that there's a misconception about whether choice is how it should be called, or that flexible masking somehow is not a good thing. The flexible masking allows us more range of caring about each other. I see it as the flexible, if you have a mask situation in a classroom and you're saying that there will be, there could be, and I don't know if this is a real case, but if there's silent reading, could they be unmasked? If there's situations where, they do things so that they're not interactive during a class time, would they be unmasked? I'm asking if the flexible masking is what I think it is, which is giving you not just the option to wear one or not wear one, when the situation is that they're mandatory to mask because of an immunocompromised situation of either teacher or student, that there's some flexibility. And I just wondered if that has been proposed or whether it's been thought of. Since there is an ending, I think there's an end date, or I think there's a transition that you're heading towards. Can that be part of the transition before April break, where the teachers find a way to make it work so that people feel safe? And I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the details are. And I
For
don't
me,
need to know.
it's the driver of where we are. I mean, if the mandates disappear, in effect, what it's implying is society is as was. Okay? And therefore, the decisions that we make as the school committee and the administration is to get from where we are to that goal. And so there are some criteria, such as what happens with, a child or a student who has issues. What does that mean to the rest of the class that doesn't? That's what has to be determined.
Sure, it's that
and that's
balance.
the only thing that has to be determined.
Right, so let me just clarify. I think, again, like I said, I feel good about where we are across 4 buildings of a couple thousand kids all together. We have 2 classrooms that we're currently discussing where the discussion needs to be held appropriately within the range of that family and that class and that teacher and that principal. And they will take care of it. That's their job, and they will implement, and it is their authority to do so, and we will work with them. But they also have to start from the framework of an initial communication, and then they're gonna work it out. As I said, I know those 2 classrooms. I know those emails, I know those kids, I know those principals, and I know those teachers. And there was a second set of calls that went out tonight to follow up to say, I want to have more conversation, and they will work that forward using the health parameters and knowledge they have to do what makes sense in this next phase of transition. And I'm comfortable with that. It doesn't, I certainly recognize I think that we will be able to, yes, build in as much flexibility as possible in those settings. Nobody wants to be in that place. Nobody wants to be in a place where we feel we're compromising one child's needs against another's. Like, I understand the tension of those needs. We've been living with tension for a long time. And I think we've transitioned at each stage through that. I feel very, very good that across 6 schools, we have some very limited areas where there's more conversation to take place. So I feel pretty confident that those steps will happen. And I guess it's a leap of faith that you would trust that we would want to have as flexible a classroom for everybody as possible, and that you would have to trust that we would be using our judgment to care for the students in our charge and to do the best work we can. I think it just takes a little time. You have to remember you're on a 1-week window again, where we're trying to move quickly with 4,000 students and 700 faculty and 2,000 plus parents to communicate clearly. That is an art that is hard to get right all the time. I think we're pretty close. I think that, those initial communications started a discussion, and it'll clean up as they move forward.
I don't question our ability to get there. I'm just putting out there for people who think that there are other issues that have to be worked through, because we can't just automatically flip-flop.
Right.
Because in the scenario that we've been in for the last 2 years, there are considerations that we would have never had to think about pre-pandemic.
No,
But we do
I-
have to think about them now.
We do, and I think we're making really good progress. I understand that it's not as fast, and for others it's too slow. Like, this is the ongoing circle of conversation that we have had at every transition. You've been along for the ride, all of you. At every one of these transitions, this is the exact cycle of discussion that we've had to have, because it constitutes what happens with change. Those people that are ready, those people that aren't, those people that need more work. We're right in the middle of all of that. I feel really thrilled that the number of cases we have to iron out are really small. Imagine where we would be if I'd had 40 of those. Okay, so I'm heading into vacation week thinking that we're in a very good place. I'm going to celebrate. I feel very good. I feel very confident about where we are. I am thrilled to be moving to more flexible masking. I can hardly wait to see little kids' smiling faces. The faculty of the elementary school, many of them have been waiting to unmask. We understand where we are, and we are happy. And yet it has emotional and physical complications for a portion of people that also we care about and work and live in our buildings. So for me, I'm feeling super good that most of them are pretty happy. So I'm going to stay in the moment. And I think that I want to be confident with you that we'll shepherd this through, and that, it's only going to get warmer, lighter, and better as we move forward into the spring. And we're having plays, they're returning to assemblies. Like, there's a lot of good news on the ground for where we are, and I think we've got a good chunk of the year left to really enjoy this transition. So the timing couldn't be better, and I think the fact that we're jumping on the 28th and just moving forward is very smart. So, feeling pretty good.
I had a quick question.
Yeah.
It's about KN95 masks.
Yeah.
About a month ago, I asked about our supply, and I'm asking simply because that's what the Board of Health was recommending for those that feel a need or those that are immunocompromised.
Yep.
I would just want to make sure we have a supply for those who cannot access KN95 masks, whether it be teacher or student, in that scenario where a parent says, I want my kid to have that kind of mask, we don't have those.
Yeah.
Is there access?
Yes, we have good access and good supply. Yeah, and I think.
If I recall your answer last time, is they're available at the school if they ask for it.
Yeah, we've been delivering boxes of everything everywhere. I feel like all we do is deliver test kits and masks, and we've got it down to a science. So, I think the at-home testing kits, we didn't even talk about that. Like, those are rolling out. Andrea Macknick, shout out to my assistant, moves like 3,000 test kits on her own, and the maintenance people pick them up and deliver them. She bags them and sorts them. They go to the buildings. They break them into classroom settings and move them out. I was at Mill Pond today, and Peter Gelnitz had, 24 bags in his office stacked with all the test kits ready to go, all the bags labeled, and they run them back and forth. So that they go home tomorrow. So they'll, we're
That
just.
process went very well. I mean,
Yeah,
got
you can see
very
that,
good
that one,
feedback.
thank you.
I'm so sorry that I didn't even mention the at-home testing
Yeah,
program that
yeah.
seems to be working very effectively.
Yeah,
And,
I mean, it's just what it is. It is the work of the year, and it is going smoothly, actually, when you look at it. It's not comfortable, it's very painful, but for all of us, I'm not saying for me, but for the world, for our faculties, for our families, but it is going, and lots of it's going well, so that's good.
Yeah. So we're going to move on to our next agenda item, which is related to our COVID update. And so in planning this meeting, I had put on the agenda, vote to rescind policy EBCFA, face coverings. And after this went on the agenda, we received an updated policy, a sample policy from MASC that would be a replacement policy if you didn't fully want to rescind this policy. So if people remember, this is a face covering policy that we voted into place at the start of the pandemic when we were returning to school in August of 2020. It's all a blur. So we had a policy that we voted in for masking. So, yep, Daniel has put that up on the screen, just talking about, we lived through that. So the exceptions of when one didn't have to mask, but basically it just said that we're gonna mask all day, every day. So the new updated policy will still be policy EBCFA, face coverings, but it's just an updated policy with the new state guidance. And so what it does is it's a policy that says that individuals who are vaccinated are not required to wear a mask, but may do so if desired. Face covering that covers the nose and mouth is strongly recommended to be worn by individuals who remained unvaccinated. It says students and staff returning from 5-day quarantine following a positive COVID test must follow strict mask use other than eating, drinking, or outside, and conduct active monitoring for symptoms through day 10 of exposure. So that's asking anyone who tests positive to wear the mask for 5 days straight, or to do the 5-day quarantine. And then it says that 2 important pieces, and this is gonna be true for all of our schools, masks are required in all school health offices. And by federal public health order, all students and staff are required to wear a mask on school buses because they're considered a public transportation, and that's still in place through the federal government. So instead of voting to rescind the policy, I would suggest that we replace that policy with this policy as again, a transition, a process into moving towards not having masking, but I'm open to discussion or thoughts about this idea.
So I would move that we accept the updated policy, since many of these things are still mandated either by CDC or by state health agencies. Therefore, they still apply.
I'll second that.
Sarah, any other discussion about it?
We should just mention that the guidance statements come from the Mass Department of Public Health, the CDC, is it? Yeah, CDC.
Yeah, Center
Yep.
for Disease Control and Prevention.
And Mass Department of Elementary and Secondary Education.
And there
DESE.
are links there to that, yep. Any other discussion about this?
And the Board of Health really mentioned all these things. The Westborough Board of Health.
Yes, yep. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so that is 4, with 1 member being absent, to just replace the EBCFA face covering old policy with this new one, just talking about the 5-day quarantine, masks required in school health offices and on school buses until such action is taken by the federal government, because that's why we're still masking on the bus. Okay, so I will share that with Andrea, who updates all our policies, and she'll replace that for us. Thank you for that. I love that we're having more requests for field trips and trips.
Yay.
So we have another on the agenda. Our next item is a request for approval of a field trip to the Massachusetts DECA State Career Development Conference, March 10th through 12th.
Me too. I am very excited to see the return of field trips. I was excited when one of the principals was talking about the assembly they're planning when they come back. Although it's been very interesting to see the amount of virtual assemblies they've done where they've gotten very creative. Yes, I would recommend that you approve this trip. I think it's a new trip. It's a new group. They're doing, basically, they do a competitive-based visit to go present their business work, and I think it's a neat, it branches off of a club organization that I think will continue to grow. And one of our faculty who's excited to support that, and it's exciting. It's like new pieces. So as we look at the diversification of the ways that the high school is providing ranges of clubs and organization, this is a new one, which feels good. So I'm very excited.
Yeah,
Plus it's close, it's local, it's
I think
easy.
they won a competition to get into this competition.
they
so
did.
They
So
did.
I wouldn't stifle their progress.
No, and I was looking at the agenda, and it sounds amazing. Like they
Yeah.
have a quiz bowl, and then they have cornhole and trivia, and
I'm
like all
really
kinds of
excited
fun
for them to
things.
go,
So,
yeah. And they won, thank you, Sarah, they did win a competition earlier to go, so it's exciting.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to approve the trip.
Second.
Question,
Is there,
discussion?
so budgetary question. So is this paid for by the individual students? Is this paid for by the department? I'm just curious.
Typically, just like when students do a traveling trip to, another country, when we do field trips like this, students are paying their hotel. There's usually a cost for the trip, and there's a cost, and we usually, the club or the school will pay the fee for entrance to the event and the bus, so typically that's the type of thing. If we were traveling out of country, busing, travel, everything is built into the total wrapped in cost. I don't know which one they're going on this, it depends, but,
It says they earn the right to compete
yeah,
by placing at the district level.
cool.
Is that what it-
Yeah.
Pretty exciting. And it just, I mean, no one else can see what we're reading, but it's an opportunity to attend motivational speakers, fundraise for Muscular Dystrophy Association, and meet with representatives from business colleges around the state. And then it's just a complete state career development conference. It's great, really great.
Any other discussion? All right, all in favor? Great, that is 4-0, one member being absent. We approve that, so I will sign this, Ms. Bach, and get this back to you. Thank you. So another exciting item on our agenda is a Borough Sugar Shack annual report. So I'm going to invite Sherry Stevens up to the microphone. Welcome, Sherry.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So when we attended FinCom and we did we had the summit with FinCom and Select Board, we talked a little bit about the Sugar Shack. And I said at the end, I felt like I wasn't clear because I just hadn't had time to draw the data together and provide it in a succinct way. So I called Jerry afterwards. I go, I need you to come do your report. But we also know that we want to start a regular annual report where we give you a set of kind of clear, defined statistics. So I'll turn it over to Sherry, and Dr. Stevens will lead you through the good news of the program.
Thank you so much. As always, it's my pleasure to be here this evening and to kind of walk you through where we've been in the last 3 years with our trends as part of an annual report. And specifically more focused, I know that Erin LaPrade, program coordinator, was here in the fall to talk about program success, but really this is more targeted toward the things that have led us to kind of be financially more solvent in the 3 years that we've been there. So I'm excited to share. And just for context for our public audience, the Borough, our Bridging Over to Right Opportunities program, is for students ages 18 to 22 who require special education services post their 12th year at the high school. So it's located in the community at 15 East Main. And as a subsidiary of the program, we have the Borough Sugar Shack, which is a vocational learning lab. And if you haven't visited, you should. I'll just share with you in terms of our next picture, you can just see the level of productivity. This is sort of our post-Valentine picture board here, so you can see the kids actively engaged. It was a tremendous season. I don't have figures yet on that, but excitement's building for that to be proclaimed. But kids were just on the ground, working, greeting customers, packaging, delivering. This year they delivered orders to school to staff, which I think staff found to be like very convenient, and that was extremely successful. So I'm very happy and productive working team there at the Borough and the Borough Sugar Shack. Some of the trends that we looked at for the Borough program really for the last 3 years include kind of gauging where our student population is, and certainly we did a lot of projecting as we were moving into the initiation of this program. So you can sort of see the summary for 2019-20, that we had 5 students through age 22, and then often we have what we call diploma deferral students who may need part of a year beyond high school, or maybe 1 to 2 years, to work on specific skills to continue to move them to be productive citizens and obtain full-time jobs in the community. So you can see as we go through the years where we've been with students, and we were pretty stable in 2019 through 2021, and then we started to see an uptick in 2021 through 22, and now we're doing some projections for next year where it looks like we could have between 12 and 16 students in the program. You can also see in column 2 the staffing pattern and the staff to student ratio, that we really haven't changed our staffing pattern. That's something that we will need to consider certainly for next year. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But really significant in 2019 and 20 was the addition of a program coordinator that kind of is our umbrella person, and making sure that both things are really ticking forward on both sides of the house, both for the business and for the program. And because we were getting busy and beginning to think about extended day opportunities for students to be working in the Sugar Shack, we also hired a job coach. Traditionally, we've hired pairs, but this person had flexibility to be in on a Saturday, and adjust hours accordingly. So that was really significant. In 2020 and 21, in terms of some interesting factors, there was no community-based instruction. Department of Developmental Services, one of our state agencies, had some closures and some loss of resources, that impacted sort of age out for post-borough programming. So we would actually work with parents to stabilize, to keep students in the program until they had the opportunity to matriculate into community programming. In 2021 and 22, we hired a new teacher who's just been incredible in the design of the program and the curriculum and things that were happening in the community. We started to see an uptick in move-ins for students, so we had 2. And again, the DDS backlog continued to impact our students who were ready to age out. For next year, we continue to assess the changes in the sort of the trajectory of the student cohort and look to balance staffing support internally. Meaning, if we have 3 students coming from the high school, then we would have some paraeducators that would travel with the students to the borough to support the programming there. So. For the Sugar Shack, we also had some exciting trends for growth and interesting factors. It was our first year of operation in 2019 and 20, and we hired a new manager who really came to us with a high level of industry knowledge and retail experience. At the same time, the pandemic struck. So it was interesting, and I would say that Kristen Dada-Wall, who's our manager, and Erin became like such a dynamic team because it was just them in this insular society, so to speak, but really reinventing and innovating how we would be doing business moving forward. So moving into the next year, 2021, certainly more advanced marketing promotions. They were doing sort of online Zooms to engage customers and to talk with other businesses about how they were thriving and or surviving the pandemic. We began offering paid employment opportunities for students as we could welcome them back weekends. And some of that also came at the same time with loss of foot traffic and community events, but we also innovated in initiating curbside services and launched the online store. And then also Erin and Kristen went after opportunities to be able to begin to ship products, across the United States and beyond, which has become pretty successful. The increase in business really has led to increased opportunities for students, which is exactly, meeting our goal with the program as a whole and increasing their vocational skills. And as of today, students that have gone through the program, the majority of them, I'm going to take a guess because I don't have the exact percentage, but I'm going to say at least 90% of them have paid employment opportunities in either Westborough or local neighboring communities. For the 21-22 year, certainly the increased and repeat special orders, which was nice, and we were really pushing corporate business engagement and orders at that point too. And again, like the word of mouth just kept really moving us forward and increasing our transactions and order values and special orders. So really a high profile for the Borough Sugar Shack in terms of getting our branding out there and sort of the mission of the program and sort of how positively lives were being impacted through this program and also through the immense community support. Here again, you see happy, hardworking, and productive faces. Again, like the days are so busy there and the kids are so engaged, whether they're on-site or in the community. And every student comes with an individualized special talent that's just put to such good use, and they are so happy. So it's a good place to visit if you haven't been. As we get into looking at our cost analysis, particularly as it relates to staffing, you can see the chart here. And you can see who's charged off to general budget, our special educator, our 3 paraeducators, our job coach, and then there's a succession of related service providers that kind of matriculate in and out of the program. So they would be stabilized across the district or primarily at the high school and come in an hour a week or 2 hours a week, depending on what's needed in accordance with the student's IEP. The two Kristen and Aaron's positions, the program manager and the store manager, are charged to a grant. So that's how they're funded. And whether the program was in the community or at the high school, like you would see the majority of staffing still needing to be attached, to the program. Here's the operational cost, so you can see, what it costs for our lease and all of the associated costs for the year, bring us to a total of $101,166. And then here you can see the total cost analysis for staffing, operations, and then our average district cost per student. So the way this is calculated, if we think about a collaborative placement sort of being the next, if we were to have to outplace these students, the average cost for the collaborative right now would be, for one student, $83,858. And then an additional $30,000 approximately for transportation. If it were a private placement, it would certainly go up from there, anywhere from maybe $85,000 to $100,000 per student plus transportation. So we've calculated at our collaborative placement cost, and you can see the math there and what we would be talking if they were outsourced, against the program's costs, which gets us to the cost savings of $696,201. This is a more refined slide that David and his team put together. So, I'll ask him to kind of walk this through for us. And this is really the report for our revolving account, which was a bill, and Lisa and Amber and all of the community supported working with our legislators to get passed so that we could set up this type of business operation as a public school in 2018. So that was really significant and sort of like one of the hinge for us being where we are today. And I would let David just kind of walk you through the detail of this slide.
Sure. So this is the same revolving account, slightly more condensed. That's in the budget book. I don't want to spend too much time unless there's any specific questions on it, but essentially it's as of December 15th. And part of the reason is because of the process in itself, how we use access to the town and then deposits go into the town and things like that. So while the deposits may be made at a certain point in time, they don't reflect in Munis. So the numbers are, as of today, would probably be slightly different. There's just a lag in time. I don't know if there's any specific headlights, but again, I think it's just quick to maybe walk through the 21, 22 column, a row. So the beginning balance is always what you roll forward. So that's a 31,000. That's the revenues we receive. This year on the revolving account is that's a 28,000, and then again all the accounts that you see listed in the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns are kind of the expenses that are applied to the revolving account themselves. And again, as of the 12/15 date, there's currently $7,000 available as the ending balance. Again, but this is lagging in time. If you guys are curious as to what we have. We could probably give you updates, but again, it's the lag in time between Munis and the deposits. Overall, the status of the revolving account is extremely healthy, and the revolving account is essentially utilized for operational cost, ensuring that the program has supplies and materials they need necessary to fund that, and that can also include, obviously, it does include, the candy aspect, which we have heard from time to time they do struggle, like our food service, with supply chain issues, but they're doing really well over there.
No question.
Do you have a question?
I do, just about this. So where do I know we approve donations frequently. Where do those end up in the financial analysis?
So in Munis, the way it's set up is that we actually have a borough account, but we've actually designated the borough account with different suffixes, so to speak. So there's the Borough, there's a Sugar Shack, and then we actually have a specific account for donations. For the most part, donations, I shouldn't say that. The majority of donations that come in are used for salaries. So we use that money to pay students. We do get donations, which we accepted one this year that had kind of outlined the specific criteria for the bowling engagement, YMCA membership. So they worked very closely with Erin at the Borough to kind of define some of the more strategic uses for this donation. And then the donor was kind enough to actually almost use it as a restricted fund to apply those donations to what the Borough had outlined. So the donations are captured in its own accounting group, and then whatever the restricted nature of it, if there is a restriction on it, we follow those guidelines specific to the donor.
Thank you.
That's a great question, Sarah. I would say in terms of donations, for this year, we've had 13,000 in private donations between the GoFundMe and private donors to sustain the student work paid employment program, and then an additional 7,000 by private donors for things that they may have specifically wanted or needed, so. Other questions?
So just comments, right?
I was just going to say, it was very helpful to have that slide that Dave just explained, only because when we're looking at our budget books and things, obviously this has its own separate budget with things like donations and all kinds of, paying employees and paying the students and as employees and operating costs. And so it's just really helpful to have that in the same format that we can just look at. It has this revolving account. We know how to read those now and look at that. And so it's just, I find it very helpful.
Absolutely, I agree. It was helpful for us to also go through that exercise, and we plan on, presenting it as part of an annual report.
Yeah,
So.
I think that's great. And then even just the that slide about the cost savings. So even though this is a program that does require resources from our district, obviously, that those resources are nothing compared to what we would be paying to have our students outplaced in a collaborative, but also I know one of the goals of this was to have our students in our community. We don't want them going to a collaborative that's in another neighborhood or another community where they're doing maybe community work in a town that's not their own. So that is a cost you can't put a dollar amount on.
Go back to that picture of those happy, go back to the picture of the happy students in their home environment.
Yeah.
Great.
And I know some of them they're known to be the person behind the counter at at the Sugar Shack. They're turning into little celebrities, I think.
We would
So-
love for one of them to become our assistant manager one day, or maybe
Right.
that would be a collaborative role. But
Right.
yeah, it's pretty.
And I have a question, because in looking ahead, it looks like that the Borough program is going to be full, like with a lot of students just from our own community. And I know at one point we had talked about taking students from other communities, like tuition in some students. Is that still something we're going to look at, or are we like kind of full with our own?
We would love to, and we've flirted with the idea, and I can't, again, quote, but the number of other school districts that have come to visit and now engage, like in social activities. I think a district, I don't want to misquote, but came the other day and they did tie-dyeing and they shopped in the store, and, you know, they did some skill building, so it's really exciting. I think other districts are also flirting with the idea of how to do this program if they don't have a program. So like we've been giving good information without giving away the store, so to speak. But anyway, I think that they'll probably do their due diligence to see what's possible in their communities. But I think we've also discussed the potential of, we see this very much as a tiered program, you know, and as we learn and grow, I think we're defining that more. So that it wouldn't be that a student would necessarily have to come for all 4 years either. Like they might come for a year and we could do some skill development, and that might, you know, be the equivalent of some portion of tuition in. But I would also say that we need to also protect the integrity of our program and our values in the original design. So we've done some projection around the numbers, but you never know when you will have that move in that you need to welcome, or maybe a student is going to defer diploma and do a 13th year. So, you know, our commitment is really to the Westborough community, who's just been so supportive and wonderful toward us. And then certainly we would consider beyond that as another form of revenue stream if it makes sense, you know, tuition in on some level.
Yeah, thank you.
I guess my first comment is it's very rewarding to see the program thrive, particularly when the school district and the school committee at the time that this was created was an unknown in terms of how it would turn out. Obviously, it's turned out quite well, but most importantly, I think it's really a benefit to the kids as it was programmed to be. I think, you know, as other communities around us create something similar, it's obviously an opportunity for cross-pollination of whatever store they may create and whatever they're going to sell, which is, again, an opportunity for kids to, in effect, blossom a little greater than they have already. You know, it's almost as a follow-up to Lisa's question is maybe we have to start thinking about additional space somewhere.
Perhaps.
Perhaps, yeah.
So, well, you know, one of the things that we have available to us is that downstairs area could be renovated and expanded. So we have looked at, it's in the strategic plan.
You're looking at things. That's good.
And I also think that, you know, one of the other pieces that I've liked about us being kind of on radar and people coming to visit and wanting to either replicate the program or learn about it or understand it is that it has really cross-pollinated the social networking of more programs with our students. And so we do see like a nicer opportunity to broaden the social networks for those young adults. And when you're in your 20s, that's like something you really want. So, you know, it's been really nice to have those. And I think even if we don't fully tuition students in, Sherry and I continue to kind of innovate different creative solutions or ways to think about having pieces of our programming available, or, you know, again, things will develop more than just kind of a traditional picture of like tuitioning in a student or two students, but instead thinking about partnering with people that might want to have their students engage with us 1 or 2 days a week. So kind of a more flexible, interesting way to open up our programming. So again, advantageous to the students, all having a broader network of colleagues. And so things we're thinking about. We're not usually just hanging out on our laurels. We're pretty much excited to plan more.
It's great. It's really
Yeah.
great.
It's really great. So I couldn't help but notice what Kristen had mentioned, the increase in students in 22-23. But I noticed that the ratio of staff to student probably will change because you have more students. But the thing that came to mind was about how budgeting, that you aren't asking for more staff because they move with the students, correct? So
Yes.
they're already part of the budget.
Yeah, that's
So
the
that
plan.
people looking at this will not feel concerned that something else is being added. And so it's an extraordinary program. I just thank you so much for all your hard work. It is incredible to have watched it from its, its core at the start and really creating precedents and seeing that other districts really want to find a way to create a program like this is exactly what you hope would happen.
Yeah,
that
it's
it would
exciting.
expand. Very exciting.
They can't necessarily do it, they don't have Sherry. The secret weapon is Dr. Stevens. So again, like, I think
so
it's, again, like, it's not the vision and the creativity and the stamina and the literally, all of the work on an individual level. I think, they'll come up with something potentially, but it's not necessarily able to replicate the types of things that some people are able to do professionally. And I think Sherry's capacity for that's pretty unique. So I'm really excited with where we are. I think we have good things ahead, and Easter's coming for people that buy candy at Easter and other holidays that we continue to expand. And next year, hopefully we'll be open again for Diwali, where they can come in and do the parties we did. I mean, so those are all very exciting.
Thank you so much for
Well,
coming.
thank you for the opportunity to be here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, Sharon.
All right.
So now we get to the interesting stuff, which is, not always are things perfect and wonderful. And so the discussion now has to do with some things at the Fail School, since it's open, that aren't perfect and wonderful. Somewhere about January the 20th, we had a very heavy rain, and I think it followed up within a day or two of a fair amount of snow. The north side of the gym, which is the side that's away from Eli Whitney Street, is up against the back slope of the property. The grading in the back of the slope is fairly steep, and as a result of frozen ground, of course, the runoff that we get from heavy rain is quite substantial. We also have, as part of the design, the necessity that the doorways, as they open on the north side, have to be handicapped accessible, which means that from a design point of view, there's no differential between the threshold of the door and the outside slab. So the confluence of the drainage slope along the back of the hillside, as well as the relatively flat slab at the doorway, provided our first opportunity to find out how that grading in the back of the school would work. And I have to say it didn't. So as a result of the heavy rain, we ended up with water on that flat slab, which basically sought its way underneath the back doors. Initially, it didn't seem to be a problem, but based on a construction meeting that we had the next day, we discussed the fact that the design of the floor in the gym is basically what you see as a floor which sits on top of what are called sleepers, and which means there's an air gap underneath the floor in the gym. Well, unfortunately, the water seeped, whatever the past tense of seep is, underneath the floor, and we found out very quickly that it had traversed approximately half of the area of the floor. So, and it got worse with the snowstorm that we had subsequently. So the issue was, immediately we understood that the floor was at risk. We mobilized both the ability of Vertex, our owner's construction manager, as well as the custodial staff at the Fail School, to do our very best to deal with that issue. And what we ended up doing was hiring Mass Restoration, which is a company that's on Fisher Street. They brought in their equipment the next morning, which was a Saturday morning, and we're able to take advantage of the airspace underneath the floor, as well as the fact that there's a gap between the edge of the floor and the wall. And there's also access at various places in the middle of the floor, so that we were able to use warm air blown in along the edge of the floor and exited through the openings in various places along the floor. And we were successful in drying out the floor and the water below. We were able to do that because that company reacted immediately to our needs, such that let's say, expansion that happened near the doorway, which in effect had cupped the floor, as well as getting the water out from under the floor, which had we not done that, it could have been a source of mold. And we're able to dry it out, such that the remaining issues now are that near the door, we have to do some refinishing of the floor and put the baseboards back around the gym. We were very successful. The second piece of this is that we notified the town hall, that is the Board of Selectmen, as well as the construction manager, notified our insurance company, isolated all these costs so that they're in particular buckets. At this point, we have spent out of pocket $14,000 for, give or take, that amount of money for mass restoration, and approximately $4,000 yet to spend to refinish the floor in the area where it's damaged and to put the baseboards back. As I noted, they're in accounts so that we know exactly how much money we spent on this, and we have an insurance claim into the company for that. In addition to this, we have kept our school legal counsel advised as to what's going on here, so that any advice they have and how we structure, how we handle this is being provided. So unfortunately, that is an issue that came to pass, and you'd say, well, okay, what are we doing about this in the future? In the meantime, the custodial staff has isolated the, let's call it, water access to that space by virtue of sandbags and tarpaulins and so on, so that we won't see it in the near term recurring. In the meantime, we have asked our architect to deal with this issue in terms of positive design solutions, which will occur more than likely during this February vacation, of which two things will happen. Part of the drainage path will be regraded so that this can't happen again. We will isolate the slab from the potential of being, of having water access this area. And then finally, we will create a trench drain near the door so that if water ever gets that close again, it won't go inside the building. So it's been, I guess, an interesting effort in terms of construction management for things that go bump in the night, which nobody anticipated, felt that everything was fine back there, but Mother Nature has a tendency to test us. And so we were tested on this event. But I have to say the custodial staff that we have in Westborough, in the school system, is amazing in what they can do and how hard they work.
They did a great job.
To head off what might have been a very expensive disaster.
Well, we've definitely had, if you remember Mill Pond, we did 2 floors before we got to where we needed to go. So I just want to be reassuring to everybody that it's under steady control and it will be resolved, and that the quality of flooring that we were guaranteed will be in place and it will move forward. I have a lot of confidence in Steve and the team, but also just the process of being steadfast around documenting and following up. And I think the Mill Pond floor is a perfect example where we struggled there, but we didn't accept it. And we made a plan and we moved forward with the support of the town and the school committee. And the quality of that is in place now for everyone who enjoys it. So we'll certainly get the fails. It's unfortunate, but it is construction, and, we'll get it resolved.
In the real world, it's good that it happened now, because if it happened a year from now or 2 years from now, it would have been a struggle, I think, to move as fast as was done here in order to minimize the damage and the potential future issues that could exist. Another issue that remains at Fales, which we're working through, is the performance of our geothermal system. There are issues that remain with it, and in terms of the startup, there's originally there were planned 49 wells. Those wells are 600 feet deep, and they supply the geothermal heat, if you will, that's used for the heat exchangers in the building. Currently, the system is not as we felt it should have been designed, and we're working through fixes with the architect and the various people involved to make sure that the town gets the value of the geothermal system as required. Again, we have made sure that we have our council engaged in the process as we work through these issues. And in the meantime, of course, we're running on the propane-fueled backup system, which originally wasn't planned for the building, but the school building committee insisted that it be added because things just don't always work the way they're supposed to, as is the case at this point. So you'll get updates from time to time as we work through these issues with the geothermal system. It will eventually work like it's supposed to because we'll make sure it does. And
Well, it's nice that we have the knowledge from Hastings and a working sense of the geothermal process, and the Bill Gabarino is, really supportive as well on the ground. So, we'll definitely get it resolved.
And I guess I will say, of the three issues that we've talked about before, one was solar, one was the geothermal, and now the gym issue. The solar is really performing well. It's amazing how much energy we've gotten out of the system, even at this point in the year. Of course, we don't get much when there's snow on it, but based on how they're set, the snow disappears fairly quickly. So that system is performing well, and in fact, the performance, I believe, is available for people to see just by getting on the school's website. And if it's not available right this minute, it's being set up. So
Yeah, it is
would
being
be.
set up. I'm not sure it's up yet, but
Yeah, I got a chance to look at it today, so
yeah.
I think it's there, but we'll see. But it is doing very well. The system is designed for 400 kilowatts. The maximum we've seen so far since it went online was like 330. Today, it peaked at just over 300 kilowatts per hour. Most houses use about 500 kilowatts a month, so it's doing pretty well. We look forward to its benefit, which allows the town other opportunities to use the excess electricity that we're creating, either for schools or for other purposes that the town may have need for. And I guess I'll point out that we have in the design, although it's not installed yet, 2 vehicle charging systems that'll be available. And from the way I understand they work is you want to charge your car, you use a credit card, and you take the energy out of the system. The secret is whether they're the same plugs everywhere you go. We'll see how that works out. So that's my story.
Thank you, Steve. Does anyone have any questions about the gymnasium floor? Anything?
Thank you very much for handling much of this. Thank you.
No, you're welcome. The committee is pretty good on this stuff. I can tell you, we've had practice now for 4 schools, and there isn't much that gets by the committee. We have a member of the Finance Committee, have 2 members at large. We have other members who represent the school system in different ways, as well as Marianne Stannard, the principal at Fales, who obviously looks out for what happens to Fales. So it's a good team. We work very well together, I think. And Amber as well. I left the superintendent out.
That's okay. It's fine. I'm clean up on the messy stuff.
There you go. Yeah, when we need a real push, somebody I know who sits on my left here is able to do it.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate the update. We're going to move into our superintendent's mid-year goals.
All right, so I always take this time mid-year to just provide to you a return to the goals that you approved in October that I put in front of you. A couple of things about this. I mean, I think the comments are self-explanatory and you can spend some time looking at them. It's really for the purposes of you being able to just kind of track things that we're working on, specifically aspects around my targeted leadership work so that you can start to think about my evaluation at the end of the year. It's kind of an annual process. The part that's missing this year that you're typically also getting is usually the mid-year report on strategic plan. You'll get an end-of-year report, which will be kind of first implementation steps on strategic plan. I think we'll be in a good cycle by then. So this year you're getting just an update on my goals. And I think that a couple pieces, I'll walk you through them and it can be succinct. Of course, the overarching goal this year, really looking at continuing to maintain the work that it takes to move through COVID. I definitely have COVID fatigue. You can feel that I have less patience around discussion. I know that. I'm trying to be self-aware, like we're all very, very tired. I think that I would say, though, that this year one of my target goals was that I've tried to absorb the larger majority of the planning work myself and to release Daniel, Sherry, John to do important work that they need to do, and to not pull the leadership team together for as much planning framework and to release them and to pull them strategically to update them. So I had a strategic, quick half-hour meeting today with the elementary principals to talk about the status of where we were so I could provide your update. But really, my goal this year has been to hold on to more of that. And that definitely, I feel good about that. And I feel like while I can say I have COVID fatigue and I realize I'm, more short in my sense of patience for processing things, the work we've done on the ground has continued to be strong. I think that I want to acknowledge that my assistant, Andrea Macknick, and nurse leader, Judy Noonan, have really worked to maintain those protocol updates with me, single-handedly looking at the fact that we have managed thus far moving through a lot of testing changes and protocol changes and masking changes, and that across all of those, they really have done a beautiful job. I mean, really, when you think about it, we've had like 3 major organizational changes, moving to test and stay, then moving to at-home testing, and now moving to flex masking again. So as we look at the transitions, they've all taken a lot of time. I just really want to give a shout out to Andrea and Judy, and Andrea in particular, who's really done the majority of kind of editing support and push of communications for me. We've also been running vaccination clinic support and communications. So this year, kind of the arm of that work has really centered in my office with me and Andrea, and really trying to, when you look like a year ago, you had Daniel, who was spending every waking moment organizing the communications of all those teams, trying to make the curricular decisions. So when you look back to those phases, shifting those leadership people back to that building-based work, back to supervision, back to project-based work was a huge targeted goal on my part as the superintendent this year. And while I can't release them fully from it, the goal was to have it be less of a burden for them. So I feel that I've met and am exceeding that goal in the sense that I've been able to do that. And I feel like it's an important part to the mission of the district this year. If you look at the other core areas, they're all going to align to the standards, which should help you at the end of the year to go back into those larger documents and think about that performance benchmark and give you some things to think about and to push on. The instructional leadership phase, I think it's just interesting that, one of the things we did was we tried to be really, really targeted this year in limiting where we put our focus. We knew that we would have some impacts. We're still really compromised as a district on many fronts, and therefore we really held on to just core things where we said these are the things we're going to guarantee to get done. And I feel like when I really did this the other night, I could see like we're making good progress. The strategic plan, we acknowledge that it's on an adjusted target. We stepped back and created the space to do a new timeline. I feel good about where we are at this point in bringing it forward. You can see that based upon that adjusted timeline that you're going to receive on the next meeting, that, you know, while the final deadline is off by about 2 weeks for you to have that in front of you, we've been able to recuperate the pacing on that and bring the plan to you. You've already seen the 85% probably draft, and now it's moving forward. We've gotten really good feedback from people. Sherry's gone. I would give her a shout out. I just want to commend Sherry. I mean, all of our leadership team play different roles at different times to kind of kick everybody in the right direction. I get my fair number of kicks, you know, from the team, and Sherry really took point on pushing us back into the timeline and time frame to get the strategic plan drafting back on track, and was very supportive to making that happen. Let's see. So I think when you receive it on March 2nd, and it's going to be really pretty much complete. The feedback that you've shared with me has been really meaningful, and like I'm going to be rolling that in. I've gotten feedback from most of you. I'll be taking that and then adding it into the edits along with the feedback we got from all faculty. So all of our faculty did faculty meetings, we gave them Google frameworks, leadership team strands, extended leadership team looked at it. So at this point I have a whole kind of like final pile of feedback, and now I just need to kind of really get a couple days to really work it into the document. I feel good about that work. It's not work you can do in bits and pieces. You really have to immerse yourself in it. And, you know, it's hard to carve out that level of focus to really do it well. And so it's something that I feel good is moving forward, and I think will be a highlight of the year by the end. Curriculum projects, you know, again, we were very strategic. We continue to focus on our DEI practices for inclusive practices and equity-based work across district as a core value that the whole team really wasn't willing to step back from, and we really wanted to stay focused on that. That really focused on a lot of the inclusive practices pre-K to 12 for making sure that all students have fair, equal, and full access to classroom instruction to thrive, and to be able to make sure that our instruction was flexible and supportive, that help was pushing into the classroom as opposed to having too many students out in fragmented, separated programming. And we feel really good about where that is. Again, the value of being able to release the team back. You have Sherry and Daniel who've worked really tirelessly on looking at tier 2 interventions, tier 3 interventions, making sure that students are getting targeted support both in academics and social emotional work, and the kinds of supports they need for small group supports. As Andrew said, there's a lot of mental health supports out there. We want to make sure that the right people are getting to the right kids and working together and letting everybody know what's going on, and that our guidance people are adding a whole arm of work and really building it in. That change in practice has been really well shepherded by Daniel and Sherry. They've made really good progress implementing work they did with John Crocker and continuing to kind of move that forward. I think that work, as we look at it, speaks to also, I feel very good about the addition of the DEIJ team, an extended lens of diverse voices from across the faculty to be able to come together and help us look at extended feedback and solving problems, giving us a look at, from different vantage points. I'd say that David and Daniel and I, we again co-lead that group, and that they're beginning to get their feet under them and develop some sense of kind of identity and purpose. We were very, you know, authentic with them that like, look, we're defining pieces of this as we go together. And we gave them some targeted entry places. They looked at our strategic plan and gave us feedback with a variety of lenses. They also then looked at the survey data, but they also helped us step back and look at like, how did we respond to the racist graffiti incidences? How did our communication work? How do they feel about the next steps? And giving us, you know, targeted things to tackle. Next steps for them is they're going to do some training with Liza as we look at just making sure that all of our extended leadership teams have some collaborative co-training that help us kind of keep those points on mission. So you've heard us. We've been providing good updates to you this year. We heard that you wanted to hear more stranded and clear kind of continual communication around DEIJ. I would hope when we get to the end of the year, you can say that you've heard that from us. We have a record of every meeting being able to give you targeted updates around that and the work that we're doing. You know that Daniel has the March PD Day coming up, where Liza will be working with our faculties. So lots of good things happening. as you look at, and again, I speak a little bit to my role in that, there's two things, which is there's some of my specific work in that. I'm a member of some of those teams. I pull those teams together and talk with them, work with them. It's all very collaborative. But one of the important things to do this year was to release those people back to get that work done. Thus, my articulated fatigue around COVID, because I'm holding more of it, but I think was a good decision. So management and operations, again, safe, efficient buildings, fails project, you heard Steve speak about it. Like those things are time and energy focused meetings, decision-making, participation. You have to pay attention. You can't be on committees like that and not pay attention. When you're on those committees, you have to read the stuff, you have to go to the meetings, you need to know what's going on, and you need to, if you're gonna offer an opinion or a push, you need to know why. And so my role there is purposeful, and while Steve is really, for me, the core anchor of the depth of that work, I'm a good partner in it, and together we, move things in the right direction. My role on the ground is to kind of work with Bob Ferguson and those guys on different pieces of overlap and make sure that we're a responsive team. And I feel good, I kind of get the ball when it gets handed out. When you move a building over to your operations from a building project, it's a very tenuous transition. It's kind of a weird stage. And so, there's a lot of overlap work with me and the different parts of those teams to make sure that they can run the building and know what's their job as we move forward. Also mention how much I am enjoying, there's a shout out for you in here too, Dave, that, having two really new dynamic members on our central office team, Tammy Costello in HR and Dave Gordon, who you get to see regularly here, and his voice to the quality of this work and leadership across district. I'm really pleased to have these people with us. It just takes time and energy to really build meaningful relationships. It's not like you can just sit down and just do the working meetings. It's trying to spend quality time with people and to understand what they need in order to get to know teams, to get to know the district, to understand the pieces of the work, to both teach them the culture of the district while also giving them space to bring in all their new ideas. And so that's the leadership work that kind of is a part of the year. And I think the influences and positive impacts of new people are already at play in our district, and that's really exciting for me. I kind of overthink everything. That's my job. I spend a lot of time thinking about all of that, how everybody fits together, how they're working well together, and where their strengths are and how to maximize them. Most of that leadership work's kind of invisible. Like people say, what does a superintendent do? I do the budget. I solve problems. But there's an intangible leadership piece for how you get your team to fit together and how you help them do their good work. And if it's going really well, you actually look like you're not doing anything. So, I think that this team looks like they run themselves, and they do on so many fronts. But I do contribute, and I don't really say that often, but I do try to play a part. You can see then the work of that work kind of as it's flowed through my year. And then you look at the family and community engagement, there's never good enough work in this arena. I just always continue to feel that we struggle around communicating effectively. But the flow of information that is coming out of our office and off of my fingertips of notes continues to be just real live hours of work. And we added COVID, and it has layered on top of all of our other work while we're trying to write a strategic plan and do all this other meaningful work. So I do feel on target to be able to say that I'm providing what I'm capable of to the town and to our parents around communication. But you also realize that I have a return to all these committees, and that during COVID, I was sitting on the CAP committee, I was sitting on the town strategic plan committee, and sitting on our own work. So I'm very excited that some of those are finished up, but I have sustained work on those. So I feel really good about where those are. Currently, the Sustainable Westborough and the Green Committee are all it all shifts into action work now. So it's not over, it just, now they want us to own it, which is great. So now we have real work to do on the ground that's exciting. So kind of operationalizing those goals now is where I am around the master plan, and the CAP work have to be operationalized into our strategic plan and then into the action steps for kind of getting stuff looking different and feeling different. I think in 2 years, you'll see the impacts of that sustainable work being a cultural norm in Westborough. It's certainly one of my passion projects. I continue to work actively to collaborate with Westborough Connects, who provides, as they should, in a community, you either hire outside consultants who come in and do training and you pay for them and they work just in your buildings, and we do that a lot where we invite people to come in and offer parent trainings. Westborough Connects allows us to offer it to a broader audience and to offer it to the community, which is one of our service goals, which is, people want to know how the public schools serve the broader community. And so Westborough Connects gives us that reach to share what we would have done on our own to the broader community, and vice versa. They do things that then we can share. So very exciting work there. I do sit on their board, so you know that takes a piece of time and is exciting. And I think when we look at the last piece, and you can read any of the comments I left you, just that the professional culture work, we've been hurt, and I think that the impacts to culture are bruised, they're not broken. I think there's been a lot of change over the last 2 years to feelings about how the schools perform, to pressed relationships, to people that are tired. Like, all of that work has to be attended to and is part of that kind of amorphous cultural norm of professional culture. I feel that Westborough continues to be very resilient and a place where I want to work and serve our faculties. We also have work to do to kind of just get ourselves back to, I think, a well-grounded place. You see the other leadership work we do there, it's all on target. So that's where we are at this point in the year. Most of it is work that's district level, and I feel good about it. And I just try to give you a snapshot of the pieces that I own, so you can start to think about those between now and where we end up at the end of the year. So that's my mid-year report. And I'll see you again at the end of the year.
Thank you for taking the time to put that together, too.
I appreciate it. I'm happy to meet with you individually. If you want to talk about stuff or you want to sit down and look at things, I'm, again, open to any ongoing conversation you want to have. So thank you.
Yeah. Questions, comments? Comment?
You don't have to comment. You really don't. Don't feel the need.
No, I mean, every mid-year and end of the year, it's hard not to, you state it sometimes, but it's still a humbling spot that you're in to be able to talk about your own evaluation.
Yeah, it's weird.
So
It's weird and
it's
awkward.
weird, and
Yeah.
yet you're understated because you do some extraordinary work. And when you talk about the leadership being sort of an intangible, please know that we recognize it and we see it on a regular basis, and you do really strong work. And your work ethic is unparalleled to anyone I know.
Driven by anxiety, it's good. It's good to be anxious. I'm always anxious. Anxious makes me perform, so.
Good job.
Thank you.
Yep.
So the next item on our agenda is the grant announcement for lighting at Mill Pond School. This
More
is really
green work
exciting.
at play.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So very pleased to announce that we were awarded $200,000 grant for the Mill Pond LED lighting program. Again, I want to give a shout out to Sustainable Westborough, to the CAP team, to that group of town volunteers that are now, again, a committee of Westborough voted at town meeting. This is a very vibrant town. This is a town where we're ahead of the curve on a lot of this, and we're in the fold with some very high-performing communities to be caring about the environment, the world, the direction of our work, and being willing to do the big planning that it takes to make some of these changes. I just am continually impressed by that team. They also push on you, which can be very difficult. They're pushing on things they want to see have happen, and nothing moves fast enough, and there's a sense of urgency in them that I feel, and I can literally at times in meetings, I feel like I start backing up because I feel a sense of anxiety that there's just so much to do, and they feel pressed. We're members of that work, and so one of the things I'm excited about is that they helped start this grant process, and this year we got to pick up one of the applications handed to us by the Green Sustainable Westborough group who had kind of started process. So we then, again, this handing of the torch to town employees as we all start working on these targeted goals together. Bob Ferguson, I want to give a big shout out to him. He did the yeoman's work of like on the phone, calling people, figuring out what we had to do. And he and I sat together in a day and did this grant. So we got the grant, and we will do that replacement lighting. It's already moving to going out to bid. It's moving, David's on point, taking over all kind of the management now with Bob on the work to happen, so that it'll be on the ground hopefully this summer and happen. It's very exciting. The paperwork that goes with these grants is gross. It's so cumbersome. It is not for the faint-hearted. So my contribution will be that, Bob and I and Dave will probably take the three of us to find a way to do the paperwork. So again, very excited for the award. I think, it's the start of a really strong collaboration too with the town on getting these initiatives in place. So that's the update.
Thank you. Thank you for your work on that. And yeah, that's really exciting.
Yeah, it is exciting. And there's money out there. That's what this group is. There's money out there. And look at the work with sidewalks that Sarah's done. Like there's stuff out there if you get into these avenues, but it's not easy. It takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
I'm so happy Sarah's volunteered to continue to carry that work. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. I know we need to have someone else pick it up. All right, so let's see.
Okay, so we're to our final agenda item, which is a brief budget discussion.
Yeah, so Dave and I want to pick up here and start a couple important pieces, which is tomorrow, you guys were able to continue to have some working meetings with FinCom and continue to talk about the budget, both at the town and at the school level and all of the pieces, which I think is really healthy. We've continued to work on looking at all the pieces of our budget, recognizing the ongoing discussions around the stresses. And there's a couple pieces where I think we've got a couple ideas that we want to discuss. Tomorrow, we'll be going to AFC. Dave and I are going on the road again. We're going to go over and meet with AFC and answer more questions. And then I just think we're heading towards the target of the fact that on Tuesday, the 22nd, the select board will close the warrant. So it's important that any number that we're going to have and the number that we're working with is locked in so that that's the discussion point from that point forward on town floor. So Dave and I have been going back through, again, we budget so early. So after we set our number, we keep working. Dave's been working through all the warrant articles, talking with Leah, looking at our work, and then looking at the transportation contract. So two things have come of that. I'll talk about one and Dave will talk about the other. The first is the Hastings HVAC system article. And I have sent language to you that would look at basically being able to lower the overall request for this article. It's a big number, and we've been back a couple times on Hastings. I really respect that we've really said we need to focus on that building and get it done. I think it makes sense, and it makes sense to the town. We've gotten a lot of support of the capital committee discussion for this and from select board. I just really want to thank that level of memory and talking and planning. So one of the things that we think feels logical is to redirect the remaining funds from two warrant articles that were for building projects, design and engineer drawings that are left, and some project money from the article work for the modular at Armstrong. So the language speaks to basically asking for the town to basically redirect that funding. That's money that has been borrowed. Now, when we did this one other time where there were some differing feelings about it, we were redirecting the debt, the borrow capacity. I think that there were feelings about that were a little more complicated. This is, again, funding that's borrowed, that's sitting there that needs to be expended. My recommendation looking at this is that we rewrote this to basically propose that it would lower the amount needed. I think that, that makes a lot of sense. David thinks so as well. The other thing is that this is also in line for the ARPA funding. If that ARPA funding came through, again, we would be able to then direct some ARPA funding to some other things as well. So it's advantageous on a variety of ways. So that would be, I want to open this up for discussion. I'm seeking your vote of approval that we would forward this article as drafted. I think Steve had read it really carefully and had an edit, and that we should open it for discussion.
No, I wanted to, what you mentioned about the previous article that we brought forward to town meeting that feels similar to this is going to really have to be explained very thoroughly, that it's not a debt.
Right.
It's already been borrowed.
Yeah, these are, in effect, excess funds that weren't needed for those projects, but the money is borrowed and it's sitting in the, financial side of the town. So if you did nothing, these would continue to sit there and we would be paying the interest on it. It's much better to use it for something else that we would otherwise borrow money for. As was mentioned, the other discussion about what was authorized but not borrowed was the reuse of future borrowing, which of course meant that there would be increased indebtedness, and so that issue did not go forward. The only thing I would suggest that we do in the article information at the bottom,
Yep.
I think it's the third sentence. It begins with the contractor.
Okay, got it.
And the change should be the engineer, because the next part of the sentence says the estimate by the engineer.
Got it.
And so, not to mislead people, it is an estimate and was created by people who know the business. And I think it provides the emphasis that should be there, that
Got it.
this is believed to be the real cost to finish this thing.
All right, done. I edited.
And is GGD the engineer, or is
Yes.
that the okay?
Yeah.
Just making sure
GGG
it's-
is, I can't remember all the names, but
Yeah, that is the.
but anyway, it's like a law firm.
do a lot of
But
work.
they're not, they're
Yeah.
engineers. And they designed the sprinkler system for us. They also designed the upgrade of the Hastings geothermal heat exchanger system, which we did, I think it was almost the first project that we did at
Yeah.
Hastings. They've been very successful, and they've worked very hard for the town, and they're a very good engineering house. And, at this point, we need to do this.
Right.
And,
I think that this is certainly something that will be supported by Select Board and by FinCom and by the financial side of the town, Leah and Christie. I think they feel like this is, I think they feel like this is really smart. So we have the support of them heading into town meeting. And again, when we come in with cohesive board agreements and discussion, I think the town feels like we're doing the work we need to do coming into town meeting to get our ducks in a row. So I feel like this brings that in alignment, and I think it's a good move. So if you're comfortable, I would ask that you vote this as presented.
So just to be clear, sorry,
Sure.
I'm just reading this again. So the number 1, 2 on the top paragraph are the funds that are going to be reallocated.
Yes.
And then number 3 is what we're asking for from the town.
Yes.
And that all adds up to the difference, because we already have some
Very good.
funds for this anyway.
It's very good.
Is that accurate? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what I thought, I just,
Very good.
Yes. well
without
done.
adding any actual numbers.
Right.
Okay.
And basically takes the ask of the 1.8 and takes out that amount and just lowers the overall request for that borrow or use of the ARRP fundings, which would be either way, yeah.
Right, so that was my question. So if this is approved for ARPA funding, then, so that cancels out this, or we use that?
It would just lower the request in ARPA, allowing that total package of numbers to be spread further. So the ARPA funding is like 11 point, what is it? It's like, yeah, so we have a certain amount of money that came in, and we're going to try to disperse that across the most advantageous use in the town. So one thing feeds the next, right? So when we look at working with the collaboration on that, if this falls into the fold, meets the benchmark, funds would be directed to this, and it would be less funds, and then therefore more funds available for ARPA for the other things. So I think it's all very positive. I think why that feels like a very smart move.
Other things, when you said other things, I didn't know you meant other things for the town.
Well, the other things on the list for ARPA, there's town and school things on there, right? And this is one of our two that are there.
Right.
There's this and the chiller system that are sitting on that list. So, we're looking for opportunities, and then a range of projects, and again, we can detail them to you, you'll see them at town meeting, that will, also either come through capital or be done through ARPA funding. So I think there's another article, if you've looked at the warrant, where they have one that's potentially ARPA or funding, same thing, so.
I think they got a consultant to look at the ARPA.
They did.
Yeah, so it should move forward smoothly. So this basically says we'll do it through a borrow from the town if we don't use the ARPA funds, and it lets us plan to move forward.
It makes sense, and it makes financial sense.
All right, so I'll make a motion to approve the language of the warrant article as presented.
Second?
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right,
Thank
so
you.
that's 4-0.
And I want to give a shout out to Christy Williams, who helped me with the language. She's such a good collaborator. I called her, I had some questions as I was thinking this through. She was so helpful and helped me develop the language. And so it's cohesive with the other types of language that are in the warrant. And again, a partner in this work, even, as we all kind of keep moving forward. So I just want to say thank you to her for her help.
And whoever's going to read this on town meeting floor should practice and rehearse, because it's a lot to read.
She's got it, yeah.
It's a lot to read.
All right.
Yeah, thank you for
You're
that.
welcome. So then we turn to the other part. So that's one of two pieces on our budget updates that bring us in alignment heading into town meeting and the closing of the warrant. And the other piece is the look that we've been on and looking at going into the transportation. And I'm going to turn it over to Dave as he's tried to figure out from the transition from first student to this contract and our first kind of full operational year, kind of where we are in that. So I'll turn it over to Dave.
Sure, thank you.
Slide what, Dave?
I think
What slide?
24. 23.
Do
23 is fine.
yeah.
Yeah, 23 is fine. So what you're seeing is the current recommendation and accepted budget from Aaron and I to the school committee. I think at first, before I start, I wanted to give a shout out to my team, specifically Paige Thomas and Kathleen Lungarini. They have been far more than supportive of me. The way we work is so collaboratively. The opportunity to poke holes in things, ask questions. We often take breaks and then regroup and then say, is there another kind of lens we want to look at? Which is difficult at times because you get so embedded in the numbers. But both of them have really provided an opportunity for me to say some of your wisdom, some of your expertise, some of your experience with the district. What are your thoughts on this? So they've been extremely helpful in solidifying, my confidence in making this recommendation. In short, we looked at trends. We were really focusing on transportation and some of the trends, not specifically just the hard numbers and the numbers that existed based on the summations. The contract itself is broken up into different sections, and then there's different subtotals for each. When we really looked at the trends and we kind of poke holes in some of the language, we really focused on about 4 or 5 areas, and those were late bus runs, sports travel, summer school travel, and just efficiency. And then we started working with NRT to ask questions about double runs and runs that may or may not have been included in the initial contract that don't exist or that are there kind of almost as a safeguard. In looking with that, we found that there was opportunities for us where we could make a confident recommendation to actually level fund the transportation budget. So instead of adding the 4.3 CPI index, which is part of the contract, which is approximately $132,000, we essentially feel that once we pulled apart, we could actually level fund the transportation contract, which includes in and out of district, at the same $3,083,469. So slide 24, which Daniel can kind of flip through, basically shows how that changed based on our investigation, our analysis, and basically our trend data
Go to the
modeling.
next slide.
We'll update the totals. So now you're at, instead of a $3.3 million increase, you're at a $3.1 million increase, which lowers the ask from 5.8 to 5.57. Again, we vetted this thoroughly. We feel confident. And then, then we ask each other questions as to if, in fact, things change, kind of the unforeseeable future, just the landscape totally changing related to transportation, but also how that impacts or how that could be impacted with changes in student life, so to speak. One of the examples that we used was, for example, if Westborough decides to have a boys field hockey team. What does that look like for travel and sports and all that stuff? So we wanted to, again, ask the questions, well, if things change, do we have enough resources available, whereas we don't have to, ask for a warrant, ask for additional resources. And in that case, we were all confident that we could actually utilize the activity account that exists, which we did an analysis of as well to see that the surplus or the funds available in this revolving are substantial enough that if we ran into an issue that we needed to add a bus, whether it was for a run or for an after school, we would have those resources available, all of which is based on the hypothetical that something changes. In short, we are more than confident that we think level funding the transportation budget at $3 million, 083 is sufficient for next year.
So just to complement that piece, I mean, again, good work by the team. I'm anxious. I tell you, I'm always anxious. I'm a little less confident just because I feel like, but I trust the team. And so therefore we'll make the recommendation. I think that I think the unknown, being that we haven't seen one full transportation cycle from this company. And his look back is, again, I think they really dug into it because they had to do some trends, because the look back for last year is fragmented with NRT. And then 2 years back, when you hit a full cycle, it's for student. It's on a totally different contract. So I think recognizing that we have the emergency fallback that we could pull from student activity account, additional bus coverage or gate fees, like we'd go into those if we had to for sports runs until we would then, while we assess the year next year, it would let us step back and look. I think these guys, I think they have it right. I think we'll run it and we'll be fine, because we sometimes have double runs, like you said, where we drop those. We don't bill, at the end of the year, those come off the billing. So I think that, again, it speaks to the fact that each time we've come forward over these last 3 years, everyone said, it's the extraordinary year, we need to do this. When we're now into our third extraordinary year, where, the increase this year is one where people are asking us to do these hard looks. So, I think this leaves us with, again, the still shy of the full return on the technology expenditures, but coming back in, we're still about 20,000 shy there, but we've come way back from that in a way that I feel good about. The hit on the circuit breaker with that 630,000 just dropping in there is just, it's always a hard number to start your budgeting from, which is you start, you need to roll your budget and you're 630 in the hole before you start. So that number just really hurts us in budgeting, and it becomes hugely invisible when we're having conversations with people where I'm like, well, wait a minute, somebody came in and took $630,000 out of our budget. There's a gap there that we have no control over that doesn't get a lot of discussion. And I feel like this year I'm kind of like, I mean, if I got a 630,000 bonus on that end, we'd be talking about it. So that deficit really, you can't look away from that. Like, it is a complexity of budgeting for special education that sits on top, and every year it's lower. I haven't had a year here where it's been higher. It's always lower, it's always a gap. So, you know, I think that we've done really well on this, and the only area where we could have looked would have been transportation, so that's where Dave and the team went. And I think level funding it for next year, we can run our programming, we'll see where it goes, and if we get trapped, we'll revert to the revolving for 1 year, and then it would come back in as an increase the next year. So I feel confident that that's the responsive budgeting they've asked of us, and if we find that we're running a deficit in that in a way that's concerning, then we'll build it forward the following year using new data. So I think that's our plan. And, you know, I think you could run that number forward into the book for town meeting and let them close the warrant, and then we step forward and, you know, present our case.
The only thing that I would add is just, you know, when you talk about budgets, there's this kind of instant feeling that like you won't know about something until it's too late. Obviously, that's not the way it works with the budget. You know, we'll know almost as soon as we start the year, probably within the first couple months, if we're going to be on target. So, you know, we're monitoring that just like we do everything else, out of district tuitions, things like that. But, you know, the goal is, again, the confidence to make this recommendation, but again, also the going forward monitoring of it and making sure that, you know, our first, that the process is efficient, meaning that the transportation and the routes are efficient, but also that the invoicing and the you know, the accounts payable basically align with the trajectory of where the budget is.
Yeah, I feel really good about the level. We talked about really wanting a higher level of analysis on the budget and being able to drill down and get some more specified program pieces, and I'm really pleased that this is a sampling of, good night, you guys, of that kind of work. And I think Dave leveraging his team to really dig in on it feels like the kind of stuff that I'm excited really, you know, lifts our game, so.
Questions or comments, Lisa?
It's very creative, because it's hard to know about the stability of transportation.
Yep.
And being on the Transportation Committee, I sort of know that we could just as easily have shortage the beginning of next year.
Yep.
For the same reasons that existed this year.
Yep.
And so if that's true, and you have a backup plan, it's definitely the right thing to do.
And I think, you know, one good aspect, which, you know, we sit here and we talk about not only the difficulties with, you know, the budget and the number, but, you know, just the process. It was a nice thing for us to hear at this Transportation Committee that we have essentially in Westborough have become the model for other districts. Drivers that are now applying to NRT are saying, I only will drive if it's in Westborough.
Yeah.
So it's you know, it's a
Coming out
salute
of
to
the
everybody in the district, but it's really about, you know, the system we run and how we run it, the effort, the kudos and the financial reward that we pay our drivers with, but also kind of just that rapport. You know, I know Amber works hard with talking to school leaders and their staff about saying, you know, like, this is a tough job. So, you know, give them the praise they deserve. So it was really nice to hear from an NRT perspective that the other districts are really chomping at the bit to do what Westborough does. And, you know, we're far and above, so we're hard to catch.
And I think I want to give a shout out to the fact that it's also because we have like the nicest kids. Our kids are so nice to their bus drivers overall and really are kind to them. It makes a big difference because really that's the part of the job that is a big difference when you're driving in different communities is just how you get treated. And our parents are very, very good to the drivers and often like give them notes and say thanks. And those types of things, the culture for that and the way we treat each other matters. And our drivers are super nice to the kids overall. I mean, again, we have anomalies on both sides, both how everyone treats each other, but in general, we're just very fortunate. I think that really helps us. So I just want to say thank you to our families.
And thank you to our drivers. I mean, you know, we always pit each other's driver against each other because we think we have the best one. And I mean, NRT called it the bench of drivers, as if we have a bench plus our drivers, meaning that we don't have a shortage anymore by, you know, we really don't have a shortage right now. And that's extraordinary because everyone around us has a shortage.
Yeah.
So really, thank you drivers and thank you families.
The town should know that there was consideration of the issues associated with the drivers during COVID in relationship to what the state's performance requirements were associated with a bus contract. If they don't provide the service, we can't pay them. However, what that meant was that there was an issue in terms of the salaries that the bus drivers would have received. The school committee and administration dealt with that, and obviously it was probably a gesture that was quite well received. So having said that, I certainly in this budget year, the town will certainly appreciate the fact that the school department and administration made the effort, basically David and company made the effort to find money that we can reduce our ask to. And I would make a motion then that we accept the change in the transportation budget and that the bottom line of the budget that we now as a school committee would offer the town is $60,410,677.
I'll second.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I think we'll carry that. I'll send that across the street tomorrow. Daniel and David and I will be meeting with FinCom. You're all welcome if you want to join us.
I'll be there.
And we'll talk more with them tomorrow. And then from there, we'll start looking towards the discussions we need to be having out in the field with people to answer questions and explain the budget and to get ready for town meeting.
And please thank your team, Paige and Kathleen
Yes,
from us.
so
thank
That
you.
is really,
Yeah.
Thanks.
they are wonderful. They are.
And Cindy Crowley, who often people feel like, poor Cindy has to take all the bad news as well. And most people don't have a Cindy Crowley in a district. They don't realize that there isn't a transportation coordinator in a lot of districts. And she does a really good job for us, so
Yep.
thank you to Cindy.
Yeah, and she's been the constant in the transition
Yeah.
from one company to another.
Definitely.
And being
It
there
makes
for that, so.
NRT function at a higher level because of her.
Yeah.
Because if we didn't have, because that's what's happening in other towns is they don't have a Cindy Crowley. and-
Cindy Crowley, does a lot of hard work, and I think it's important we acknowledge her. So
Yeah, thank you.
shout out to Cindy.
Yep. The next meeting of the school committee is scheduled for Wednesday, March 2nd. Motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
All in favor? All right, have a great
vote no.
vacation break. You are not voting no. Have a good
start, and
vacation
I
break, everyone.
do.
Thank